why Millennia? Why did you start it? How did you start it? And what went into that?
Well, as a kid, I mean, the area I grew up in, we were kind of, I was kind of raised in kind of a ghetto area. And all the kids in the neighborhood were basically, there was a boxing gym and a karate gym right by my house. So growing up, I would go to boxing and I would go take taekwondo and karate and martial arts. Millennia, I would say, growing up, my brother was a wrestler. He wrestled for Rubidoux High School and then wrestled for Mount San Antonio College. So he was always kind of wrestling with me every weekend. He's a stepbrother, so he would come every other weekend and he would wrestle with me and teach me a bunch of moves. And we loved the WWF growing up and Hulk Hogan. And so I was always kind of somewhat involved in wrestling. But I was more into like boxing and taekwondo and karate. I never really looked at wrestling as an actual martial art or a form of fighting. In 1994, I had another cousin up the street who had a video store from where I lived. He called me up and he told me, I got this video and you gotta come over here and watch it. It's amazing. It's top martial artists from around the world really fighting with each other in a tournament. So I get on my bike and I rode up to his video store and I was hooked ever since. We watched the first UFC and I saw Hoist Gracie and he was a grappler. He was taking everybody down, submitting everybody. So I was instantly hooked on that. So me and my brother and my other cousin Romeo Rum, who's my partner today, we basically laid some mats down in the garage and we just started going at it every day. We were hooked.
And kudos to you, because from just a simple video spawned all of this, and it's absolutely an amazing gym, and you guys have produced a lot of amazing fighters. With that said, what is the importance for you as far as advocating mixed martial arts, amateur mixed martial artists?
I think it's huge. We start them at a young age. Tomorrow, the sport, the level of the fighter is going to be extremely high. I mean, you can see within a few years of the champions of 4 or 5 years ago compared to the champions of today, you can't even compare them. The sport is evolving at a high speed, and I think we kind of had a head start on that because I started fighting at 18 years old. I was competing and I was involved with a promotion, so we were forced to keep up with the sport, where other people, I think, weren't really competing and weren't really fighting, so they had their own ideas of how they had to train. We basically started traveling to train with different wrestlers, different Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu stylists, boxing, Muay Thai. So as kids, before we opened the gym, after the garage thing, I started to train with a lot of different people. I would go train at different boxing gyms. I would go to the colleges and the high school to wrestle. I started taking Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu classes for the submission game. So I think we started to evolve at a really early stage, and I think that's a key to our success today. We were evolving at a really early point, because in the fights that we had, I was like, well, I'm trying to take this guy down, but he punched me a few times, so maybe I need to start working on my boxing and kickboxing. My buddy fights another guy who beats him on the ground, so we need to start working on that. So we kind of evolved with the sport. We evolved with the UFC because we were already competing.
And that's very true, and, like most sports, but I think mixed martial arts is it's constantly evolving. Like you said, just looking from 10 years ago to now, it's just totally and completely different. So you guys have definitely had a lot of success with amateur mixed martial artists, but can you tell us a little bit about the success of your professional mixed martial artists moving through the ranks?
Oh, I mean, over the years, we've sent tons of people to the UFC. At 18 years old in UFC 8, I was cornering Mark Hall, who I don't think many people remember him today, but the UFC was illegal around pretty much most of the United States. There was only a few places. I believe we were in Birmingham, Alabama, or Denver, Colorado, one of those states that was legal, one of the early states that it was legal before Dana White and the Fertittas actually owned the organization. It was owned by Art Davie. And I had a buddy fighting in that, and I was helping him train and helping him work with his ground game and his grappling. And then with King of the Cage, maybe 6-7 years later, coming about in Southern California, I was teaching for the owner of King of the Cage, Terry Tribblecock, the promoter, which is one of the first events that started to put on fights in the United States after the UFC. And he started to grow really big. He started picking up a lot of bigger name fighters and this kind of thing. And training, because of that competition and competing against a higher level of guys, and him constantly putting on events on the Indian reservations where it was legal and still is legal, we started to produce a lot of talent. And we ended up signing a lot of the fighters to the UFC. John Alessio came from our camp, Mac Danzig, Gabe Rudger, Javier Vasquez, and then even today, I mean, the kids we were training yesterday are so much more advanced than we were at the time they are now. And now we have Daryl Montague, who's number 5 in the world at 125 pounds, and I brought in coaches to help train the fighters. I got about 25 coaches here now, from boxing to wrestling to Muay Thai to Jiu-Jitsu. So they're getting really good training. And I think the amateur organizations are great because it's not affecting the professional records, and these guys could get out there and get a lot of experience, and the gloves are a little bigger and the rounds aren't as long. And in boxing, amateurs, you know, the guys that come out of the amateurs usually do a lot better than the pros. You know, they get a lot of experience and they get out there and fight. That's why I'm a big fan of amateur fights.
Thank you so much, Betiss. And don't worry, because we'll be right back with Betiss in a few moments. So I know you mentioned previously in another question that you actually have fought professionally. Would you give us a little bit more information about that?
Yeah, well, my first fight, I was 19 years old. I was either 18 or 19. My opponent was 14-0. I didn't really have managers or trainers to kind of overlook me and help me, or an amateur career to build up. I did end up winning the fight on a decision. It was a very tough fight for me. I think had I had a few amateur fights or a few professional fights against people that had the same experience with me, I would have probably done a lot better. There wasn't many events going on either. There was like one show going on every year or something, so it's kind of hard to get on. We didn't know who was who. We didn't really know much about the business side of the sport. Second fight, they flew me to Michigan. I fought in Michigan, and I fought a guy who had 100 fights, and it was my second fight. And again, I felt like the promoters, just because I was working for the promoter, they were kind of throwing me to the wolves. They weren't really paying me much money. I didn't realize to fight a guy who was previously signed with the UFC, I would deserve to make some money. I didn't end up even getting paid for the fight. I ended up choking him, but I think I was pretty much gassed out and I was hurt. And I ended up catching him with a guillotine choke. It was Adrian Serrano, and I think that was in 2000 maybe, not 2000. Then I came back here and fought at Saboba Casino again. Again, my opponent was, he was an experienced fighter. He had fought in Pride in Japan. King of the Cage was developing a relationship with the Pride organization that the UFC ended up building up and taking off. I fought Iji Mitsuoka, who was a national champion wrestler. We had a draw. We had a draw in that fight. After that fight, I think maybe 2001, I fought, I had my first fight that it wasn't against somebody who was very high level and more experienced than me, and I beat him pretty quick with a triangle choke. I started to get warmed up to fighting him more comfortable. 2002, I fought Dennis Hallman, who is currently signed with the UFC. He's still fighting, and Dennis Hallman beat me. he submitted me with the choke, and I think at that point I didn't really see the sport growing. I didn't think it was going to go anywhere. My parents didn't really like the fact that I was fighting and in the sport. I had a decent job. I was bartending, and I was also in the real estate industry, and that was growing. So I just decided to pursue that, and I ended up opening a real estate company, and I stopped bartending, and we had the gym, and we had all these fighters and all these kids that were training, but I just I didn't think it was going anywhere. It was a hobby. We had a tiny little gym next door to my office, and then we were sending guys to the UFC, and these guys weren't making much money, so I was pretty much raised to make a nice career for myself. My parents hated fighting. My dad said we looked like we were gay when we were wrestling around on the ground. So it just, at the time, I didn't think it was going to blow up. So it was a part-time thing.
Well, thank you so much, Betiss, for everything and really giving us an insight as to Millennia, how it grew, the programs, and everything like that. So we just want to thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And stay tuned, viewers, because we have a lot of good stuff coming up.